Assalamualaikum everyone, and a very good evening to you all. I'm really excited about today's conversation because we happen to have two great experts who happen to be the maestros in their particular industries in relation to design, in relation to the creative process. And what we come across as, the ESO partners in the entrepreneurial ecosystem is that there's so many startups who struggle with the creative process. There's so many startups who might have brilliant ideas, but they don't know how to, connect with the consumer. They don't know how to connect with the customer for that matter. And that is exactly why we have today's session on deconstructing the creative construct. So as I mentioned, we have two maestros in the house today. I'd be very, very happy to introduce our first speaker for the day. That is Faraz Hamidi. So I've known Faraz for some while now, actually. He also happens to be he was the coach for Film Lab Lahore, and hopefully we will have him in Film Lab Karachi as well. He not only runs D Hamidi Partnerships, but is actually part of the faculty of Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture in Karachi, and has worked with great brands, from across Pakistan and even abroad, be it Imar, Hum News, and so many others. He was behind the team when Standard Chartered and Relays had their merger, the entire rebranding for PIA. Faraz is the man behind all of this, and he also happens to write for Dawn. So Faraz, so happy to have you. Hi.
Yay! How are you? Good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
I'm really excited, actually. And without further ado, I'd like to mention our second speaker for the day. So Abdullah Mansoor Zubairi is actually here with us. Abdullah is a seasoned architect. He is actually running his own family business. And besides that, he happens to teach as well. And Abdullah also is part of a morning show on PTV. And it centers around different things, but Abdullah basically talks about design and architecture. So without further ado, I'd be happy to have Abdullah in the house. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So constructing the creative construct, as I just introduced and as I just shared briefly, that there's so many startups who actually, Faraz and Abdullah, who actually struggle. It's a process, to come up with ideas. They might have different backgrounds. It might be a background of engineering. There's so many startups that are centered around health and medicine. There's so many startups centered around ed tech for that matter, fintech for that matter, and the creative process of how to put their idea into place, how to brand is actually an everyday struggle for them. But besides that, it's also about, Faraz, when you talk about the PR campaigns, that's a complete process in itself, launching a new product out in the market. When you talk about ideating, in terms of there's an entire creative process that goes, there's so much behind the scene, right? So I'd love to take a start with you and talk about the creative process, about behind the scene, how it should be, how can you visualize and how can you put things into perspective? And then following Faraz, Abdullah, I'd love to have your take on this.
Okay, huge question. And of course it varies from so many different people and different industries and, but I think as a creative person who would enter any forum, there's sort of certain, there's probably certain sort of viewpoints that I would go in with, and I'll try to sort of catch them, like the way you might want to, catch a, school of fish or something. So there are various identities that a client would have, right? The first one would be your corporate identity. That's all sort of your design part. So let's say you're brand X, you're a startup, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in because it's how we apply the craft to whatever industry you're in, right? So the first thing we probably try to say is, well, what's your naming strategy? What do you sound like? How are you pitching your voice or personality or your positioning to the world? And once we sort of have a clear understanding behind that, we'll be in a position to develop a visual vocabulary. That could take the life out of you because it's a process that could take anywhere from 2 weeks and for some, it's ongoing. It's ever evolving. Okay, and especially if you have to make a brand manual, then I mean, I'm sure the architect would know. Abdullah would know. It could take up to 8 months just creating all these sort of filos for a particular client. So you get your corporate identity in place, and once everyone is settled, then at least we have a look and feel to sort of communicate with the world. But that's just sort of the starting point. After that, you sort of get into a interior identity that when the experience is enhanced beyond the page, beyond all the media channels that are available to you, how does a prospect experience all those touch points? After that, there is your brand identity. I mean, then what is your voice? What is your tonality? How do you communicate to the world around you? And then there are all these other identities that need to sort of get curated and orchestrated so that once you're out in the world, you have a singular signature voice and look and feel that people can then begin to identify you with. So in a nutshell, I mean, that's sort of how I go in, because I know there's all this stuff that has to be done. And I'm just looking for the client to say that one thing. I'm looking for that one phrase that will get me started. And once I get it, well, then that's a miracle. Otherwise, normally we're sort of running after that one. That's the idea. That's the idea. That one thought, that one line, that one thought, that's what we're after. And once we're able to get it, then everything else becomes a sort of a blueprint on this particular micro thought. And then how we expand it or campaign it or spread it around is part of the craft. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's a start.
So, no, I mean, for a start, I have, and I'd love for you to elaborate later about the visual vocabulary that you spoke about. You spoke about brand identity, and then, how to put it all together, because it's a process, right? And then, out in the market for the startup, for that matter. But I mean, I'd really like Abdullah to speak about and talk about the creative process. And, Abdullah, if you take a step back and, I'd love for you to speak about your journey, right? And you happen to be a great young architect for that matter. And I'd like to talk about your personal creative process, and then we can move on to startups.
Maryam, I would like to start with the fact that when we are studying architecture or interior or any other creative field, I think that one thing that is extremely important is observation. So it is like built in now. I can say that because every time I'm driving around in the city, if I'm like flipping through a magazine or whatever I'm doing, everything is just being noted somewhere here at the back of my mind. So when I meet a client and that conversation is very important, where he says that, this is what we are imagining that thing to be, or this is the kind of thing that we are expecting. So I think that that's something that gets you started, and all that data that's being stored somewhere in your brain, you start, translating that, putting it out there on paper. So I think that is the creative process that we architects or interior designers follow. And there's a lot of different things that are happening everywhere. So, you just have to be a little focused. And I think that I agree with, what Faraz said, that it's very important that, you come up with that one tagline or one phrase or that one basic idea, and then everything, follows that blueprint. So that's exactly what happens in my field as well, that you need that one idea, that big concept, and then everything will just fit into place like a jigsaw puzzle. And one thing that I feel that the younger generation, or my generation, usually avoids is that we tend to go directly towards the digital mediums, like gadgets. And I kind of disagree with that. I've tried doing that, but I think that that magical connection that you have with pencil and paper, I don't think that can anything take its place. So I think that I would really like that, whatever you have, either it's like brainstorming, either, you are planning to come up with a startup, or whatever you intend on doing. I think that piece of paper and that pencil needs to be there, and it's going to take you places.
I so agree with that. And I'm so glad a young person has said this. In fact, I tell a lot of my students that, the word think has INK in it. It's got ink in it. So if you want to think, put that nib on the paper, then suddenly the communion with God or the muses or whatever you want to call it is complete. And
Yes.
you need to just do that. I mean, it has to be organic. And I think a lot of this, using these gadgets sort of, short circuits, true magic in many ways. I'm glad you said that, Abdullah.
And yes, because Indus Valley School is my school. I graduated from the IVS.
Okay, cool.
Okay, all right. I think some great points over there. You spoke about observation. And so I and Faraz, right before this, we were having a discussion about, he spoke about industrial design. I used the term commercial innovation. And so observation is actually key in that. And I actually agree. And I second you and Faraz when you mentioned that, pen everything down, the beauty of writing, even if it is about the script, it comes down to a storyboard, for an AdWord or for a campaign for that matter. That is very true. So pen and paper, they always come in handy. But I mean, taking this conversation a step forward, I really want to understand, Faraz, and I'll be happy for you to take a lead on this first. There's so many brands, there's so many startups, they need to go out in the market, they need to launch themselves, right? Or even if they are beyond the ideation phase, there's so many startups who have raised funding, for that matter, and now they want to rebrand themselves. And the entire process requires a very strong PR campaign behind it. And we see that, I know that a lot of people might not agree in principle, but social media and digital does play, an immense role nowadays.
Sure it does. Sure it
Yeah,
does.
I mean, let's take the example of edtech platforms. We have Masterclass. Let's agree that we all are online via StreamYard here today, speaking and talking about design and creative process. So how should brands strategize, one, how should they build a narrative around their brand? And then I can come to the second question, because I'd love for Abdullah to also speak about that. Yes.
Okay. Another huge question. The canvas is so big, I have to sort of try to, make sense out of this. So let's not call it traditional versus digital. Let's call it trad-digital. All right. So it's one and the same. The pipes can keep changing, and tomorrow, 10 years from now, maybe there'll be a whole new set of pipes in terms of media. But the craft remains the same. In my business, it's the inventive combination of words and pictures. That's it. That's all we do. Okay. And we don't need to sort of, go crazy with jargon about what we do. It's just the inventive combination of words and pictures. And whoever your brand, or whatever the startup is, they need to understand, back to what Abdullah and I was saying about that signature line, because there are a lot of vanilla services as well around the world. I mean, if you come up with a unique, one in a gazillion years kind of a product or service, you don't even need to do anything. Word of mouth will spread like wildfire and you're famous. But generally that doesn't happen. You need to either invent credibly and promote a way that the world can look at you. And the more compelling, the more interesting, the more sort of out there, strategically out there, you can make your perception through the tools that are available to you, the better it will be in terms of curating the kind of appeal you want to do. The difference between traditional and digital, again, is that, and this is what we tell the big guys, that the money that you're saving in terms of media spend on TV, you can now invest in developing really high quality productions. The trouble happens that because each and every one of us now is our own media company, we are each our own publisher, we are each our own broadcaster. So the cost of airing, so to speak, has dramatically dropped. But that doesn't mean that the cost of production ought to drop. One ought to invest as well as they can to curate a beautiful experience when it comes to your own brand. And when you create your brand, you have to think of them like your own children. They have to be well-spoken and beautifully groomed before you send them out into the world. And that is the emphasis that all startups need to have. about themselves. And of course, using the tools that are available to us, the branding, the architectural, the social media, all of that needs to sort of be, again, orchestrated, synergized, and all working together in tandem, depending on which ones you choose to push your thought out. Another thing you ought to do is to curate the kind of media you want to stand out on. I mean, maybe LinkedIn and Twitter is the right sort of channel for you. Or maybe if you're more pictorial, if you're more visual, maybe Instagram and Facebook might be the one for you. But whatever you choose, you must understand that today, the mass audience has gone, right? Today you need to curate your tribe. So it's back to the 12th century. It's back to looking at all of us around the world, sort of finding our fans, those that love us incredibly, and we need to just speak to them and speak about them and sort of help them. That sense of service, that sense of duty needs to then be curated. The moment a startup just wants to make a quick buck, go for the lowest common denominator as opposed to the deepest, most resonant common denominator, that's when we sort of get into trouble. Otherwise, I mean, it's really simple if you do it the right way. It's when you do it the wrong way, when you want to go for the shortcut, when you go for the cheap and easy, when you just want to go for scale, put in 2,000 rupees on Facebook and just reach anyone and everyone, you'll get the metrics, but you won't get the love. You'll get all the check marks, but you won't get the business. So you need to make sure the business, the brand is right before you go out and play the marketing game. So don't game the system, curate, then orchestrate, and then finally go out and do whatever it is that you need to do, depending on what your brand sort of stands for. In a nutshell.
I'll try to narrow down my thoughts.
Okay.
Moving on, yeah, because I think there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
I'll try not to be very broad, but for us, some great points over here. And I have a question from what you just spoke about, because I think this will immensely help the startups. I mean, I loved how you ended it with curate, and orchestrate, because initially that is the building block of, plugging in creativity and getting the right word out regarding what you do and how you do it, because the how is what connects with your customers. That's why Apple versus Intel and others, HP and so on. I mean, Abdullah, having your perspective on all of this, what, in your opinion, and how do you think can one build a narrative? One can start a positive conversation around their story, for that matter.
I agree with everything that Faraz just said. A couple of things that I would like to add, that my field is concerned, or any other creative field is concerned, I suppose. I think that usually I tell my students, and usually I tell people around me, that listen to your mind. But I think that in this case, I think that you should listen to your heart, because there are so many different things that are happening, and people are, focusing on one particular typology. But I think that I think that you just need to find the right fit. So it takes time. I don't think that the moment you graduate, you can figure out the best perfect route for yourself. I think that you just need to take some time and figure out that what makes you happy, what is it that you really want to do, and then stick to it. So please add some kind of perseverance and grit. So I think that these are the two really important things that I would like to mention. And I agree with everything that Faraz said. I think that he summarized everything beautifully. But these are the two things that I just wanted to plug in.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for your input. I mean, coming back to...
Can I just add?
Of course.
Can I just add?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Just on Abdullah's point, so in advertising, and by advertising, I mean advertising is the sort of shorthand for all things marketing communications. All right. So in advertising, there's sort of one of these evergreen thoughts, which is that where the heart goes, the mind is sure to follow. So in as much as people might be investing, incredible modeling and paradigms into their startup, they need to understand what the emotional connect is with their audience. Once they've got that right, everything else follows. Every single thing will follow after that. And more importantly, you need to stay with that emotional content for life. You can't sort of change your emotional paradigm every other day. Once you've decided that my startup stands for, you know, X, Y, and Z, then you're not going to ABC for the next 10 years. I mean, you know, so that discipline is absolutely, absolutely critical. And I could sort of imagine, at least in Abdullah's industry, once that building is made, I mean, it's there beyond our lifetimes. So I wish communication people would think in exactly the same way. They don't, because they think it's easy and they can just sort of change the campaign overnight. They need to think like architects. Once it's up, then they need to sort of abide by that, because the market is in the mind. It's in the 6 inches between your ears. You know, there's no market on the high street. Everything's happening in the mind. So this is the space, 6 inches right there. Okay, there we are. That is what you need to sort of manage once your brand is up and about.
Absolutely. And Faraz, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, so the first workshop that we took a flight with our company was empathy at workplaces.
Nice.
It is so important to resonate that, you know, in every organization at every level, especially when you really want people to connect with you. And it's so important to connect with them, for that matter. You know, it's so important. And since you talked about and you spoke about marketing is in the mind, and you spoke about architecture, I mean, Abdullah, I would direct this question towards you. I mean, as an architect, you know, speaking of rebuilding, speaking of renovating a space, how can it change the narrative around any company or any brand, for that matter?
Yes, this is a wonderful question, Maryam. Thank you so much for that. It's so like I think that it's everything. And the moment you do that, it's like a new start. It's like a new beginning. It's like a new chapter. And I think that after every few years, or, you know, like maybe after every few months, I think that you just need to look back in retrospect, and you need to see that where you were, where you are right now, and what changes you need to make. So whatever it is, you know, like maybe small changes, maybe, you know, like they are like some kind of a huge changes. I think that is something very, very important. And I think that all the big brands, they do it as well. Probably Faraz can comment more on that. But I think that it's very important. I think that even if it's just the color, even if it's just, you know, like the kind of furniture that you have. So everything plays its own part. And I think that everything is important. So yes, I think that it can definitely help you, and help you immensely if you want to rebrand it. So it's going to be, it's going to have like positive signs for sure.
Thank you, Abdullah. You just made my job a little easier, because I was, you know, so I had a discussion with Faraz prior to when you joined about color psychology. And I mean, Faraz taking your, you know, perspective into color psychology, because it plays a huge role. I mean, I'd actually like for you to take like a deep dive into that. Yes. One thing that I'd like to mention is my observation. So, you know, especially for e-commerce businesses that use the color green for add to cart, there are actually more sales, you know, because green really attracts people towards, you know, buying a product. It's very interesting. But in terms of color psychology, in terms of conversion, sale conversion, in terms of attracting people, we can talk about it. Sensory packaging. I'm getting really excited about this. So please, over to you.
The way any human being would. I mean, if it's brighter, I'll see it. If it's dull, I won't. I mean, that's basically, and that's how you really need to approach it, because that's what your audience is all about. Clearly, the strongest color scheme in graphic design is the German flag, red and yellow and black. All right, and most logos are red and yellow. I mean, take McDonald's, take Shell, take Kodak. Remember that? It was before your time, but yeah, Kodak. And gazillions of others. The red and yellow combination is very, very, visually arresting. No doubt about that. Warning signs are done in that. Exit signs are done in that, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of the ABC of color. There's also a tool called Needscope, and they've sort of arranged emotions according to color. So those that are alpha males or alpha females and who drive the Ferraris, the Needscope has given them the color red. So if you sort of fall into that zone, then your brand should be red. And then sort of Hera, the goddess of all things, fertile is brown. And then you've got yellow for joy, and you've got orange for, God knows what, and blue for, all things corporate. But you see, that's all 101. And we've sort of been there and we've done that. But now we need to evolve. And we can only evolve if we sort of take a leap in color. There was a time when people used to think that black just should never be used for food because people think it's dark and, rotting. And now suddenly black is sort of the de facto color for all things luxury, especially luxury food items. So I think there's a bit of BS involved in a lot of this, apart from the basics of color psychology. And we all sort of know that because we live in a, RGB world. By the way, the human eye is RGB. CMYK is not how the human eye thinks. We think in RGB. So I would actually encourage people to experiment with color and don't think of color as a single tone. I would encourage you to develop sort of a palette that works well with you, that resonates best with you. So if, for example, you have, and by the way, J. Crew does a great job with sort of naming colors. Even lipstick manufacturers do a great job with naming colors. I mean, imagine a lipstick named vodka. I mean, that's a sale, all right? So it's sort of, every time you give sort of interesting vocabulary to color, it shoots off the the screen or the shelf in this case. But I would sort of encourage people that don't think of yourself as a blue logo, like a dark blue corporate logo because I am talking to schools. It doesn't work like that anymore. You could be a shocking pink if you're a school. You could be a shocking pink if you are a corporation. There is no reason why that is not the case. When we were developing the color scheme for Zong, it used to be corporate blue and corporate red, as safe as it can get. But then we went for lime and fuchsia. I mean, just out of the box, because initially we thought that men wouldn't react positively to fuchsia because it was too pinkish in color. Notice how we are already sort of hardwired with bias and prejudice in so many of our sort of color choices. And we realized that Gen Z couldn't care less whether something was pink, dark pink, or pale pink. It didn't matter to them because there was no gender association with the colors. What they saw were two very vivid, outstanding colors that set the brand apart. And I think more and more in sort of the RGB world that we're living in, because we're all sort of living off the screen now. We all have 5 screens in our mind, right? We have the TV screen, we have the laptop screen, we have our mobile screen, we have the screen all around us, which is known as reality, and then we have the 5th screen, which is our imagination, our minds, right? So within these 5 screens, once you have an orchestrated brand experience, using unique colors that don't really stand for something beforehand is a brand advantage. Use colors that people haven't used before so that you can stand out, much like we did for Zong, right? Lime and fuchsia, nobody's using that. Everyone else is using red and blue. Use something that because then when you use something no one's done before, you can invest meaning behind it. Again, it boils down to, it doesn't matter what your logo is, right? You could take a tattoo on your back and make that your logo, as long as there is meaning invested behind your visual vocabulary. Once that meaning comes to life through the innovative and inventive use of color, in this case, based on your question, then I think you have a leg up on your competition. The danger is when you think, oh, I am a company, I must be blue, and I'm only going to talk blue, I'm going to think blue, I'm going to sell blue. That's death. That's a recipe for death, right? You should be shocking pink and speak to men who are into ties and maybe even whatever it is that their interests are. But that is the kind of reality you want to create. What you imagine is your reality, right? Imagination is more important than knowledge, as Einstein sort of hinted on. So that's where I would like people to go. Create, curate, and then delegate. To sum up.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think that we are conditioned since we are, since we are babies, like pink is for girls and blue is for boys, but it's 21st century and it can't just work anymore.
It doesn't matter.
I totally agree that, experiment and do something new. And I think that that's the most important thing here. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting excited because when you spoke about the color psychology and you spoke about how we associate certain colors with, let's say, a specific brand because blue is for corporate. I mean, I would. I think any that will definitely be the death of any brand. I mean, I remember giving the example of Masterclass, and they redid their logo, and it's a very nice shade of pink now. It's very interesting. Although pink is not my favorite color, but I mean, it really caught my eye. It caught my attention, right?
Mind you,
So
we
that's
just,
very interesting.
sorry, Maryam. We just changed the colors for Faisal Bank. 10 years ago, we created their identity. It was a commercial bank. It was blue and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, boring, okay? Dark blue and white, boring. Now they're suddenly migrating to the Islamic banking platform. Guess what color we were told? Pacola green, Pakistan
Nice.
flag green, right? But we didn't go in that direction. So we created a sort of a wonderful Tiffany blue, aquamarine halftone that would sort of show a progressive Islamic sensibility. Because the moment you do something that is sort of cliched, that's danger.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage people to move in the opposite direction. When the world zigs, you've got to zag. That's the formula. The world is zigging, go the opposite direction. Create your own, because that's the only way for you to stand out.
Absolutely. Faraz, would
Can't
you?
hear you. Maryam, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you now.
I can hear you. Yeah, now.
Weird. I can't even hear myself.
Are you?
Maybe it's me.
Abdullah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Let me just put on the earplugs. Just a second. This should work.
Okay. My fault. None of it's my fault. I think my battery's out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Faraz, can you hear me now? Faraz,
yes,
hello?
I can hear you.
Abdullah, can you hear me?
Yeah, Faraz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear both of you.
I actually can't. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
This is funny. Okay, Faraz, why don't you can join us back in,
I'm sorry, say that again?
You can, yeah, I can remove you and we can have you.
No, I can hear you now.
Faraz, can you hear me now? Finally, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, So Faraz, would you want me to show some of your work so that I can
Except you're just sort of
speak about the color psychology, the design? We discuss that a little bit. I'll be happy to show.
Yeah, but you're
Can you hear
breaking
me?
slightly. Say something now.
Okay. Can I showcase some of your work now?
Do so.
I'll be happy to do that. Okay, all right. I'm going to share my screen right now. Just a second. Yeah. Faraz, what brand would you like me to, please let me know. I can scroll down and then we can discuss the colors. Which one would you like to speak about?
You can pick on anything. Do you want to work? Should we do the markhor? Because I think that's super controversial.
Absolutely.
Let's talk controversial.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
I'm comfortable with controversy. Okay.
Okay. It's opening, yes.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, it doesn't show right now, but probably from here, right?
Well, you could just sort of,
yeah.
I think as long as people can see the markhor, I think that's all that, that's all that.
Yeah, I think we can.
As long
Yeah,
as that's the case. You probably might, right, there you go. There you go. And just bring it down a little so we can see the top part. The top part's what's interesting. So see, here's a classic example. Here is a
So,
classic example of a
mhm.
brand being comfortable saying to its branding agency that, listen, just because we are a national carrier does not mean that we should necessarily be green, you know? And if you sort of look at the German flag, which is,
Yeah.
red, yellow, and black, Lufthansa is dark blue and yellow. If you look at the Singapore flag, which is red, then Singapore Airlines is blue. If you look at the Australian flag, which again is the Union Jack and blue or red or something, but Qantas is entirely red and not even known as Australia Air or Australian Airlines. You see, when brand thinking takes over, then it's just so much easier to curate a identity. Otherwise, you are forever beholden to the baggage that the larger, in this case, the flagship brand, will sort of hold, and then sort of everything else gets sort of funneled down to everything else that the flagship brand will hold. So what I really enjoyed while working with the PIA team when this was sort of launched, and it flew as a while. It's still there was a Supreme. This is probably the only logo in the world where the Supreme Court took an injunction against, and sort of put a hold onto it, which makes it even more exciting. But they said that why don't we find a symbol that truly represents PIA? And that symbol was the national animal, the markhor. And it worked really well with PIA because one, like the markhor, it's endangered, right? Like the markhor, it's always on the edge of the cliff about to fall. Like the markhor, it's always being hunted. It's being, the airline's being hunted and sort of being brought down by people who are not as well-wishers. So there were wonderful sort of, what do you call it? The ecosystem behind it was absolutely resonant and relevant, which we liked. The other problem, which is the case when you design anything, is they're going to have some dumbass who's going to say, "Oh, you copied Qatar. You copied Qatar. They also have a goat," quite forgetting that every second airline has a bird or an eagle on it. So no one has a problem there, right? But suddenly, if there's a goat, then we have an issue. So the markhor is a goat. But then we needed to make it look a little bit sexier, all right? So by the way, I've addressed the point about why it's blue, because it can be. You have to lead from the brand, all right? So the idea behind the blue was it's the skies, the slogan at this time was, we fly at the right attitude, sort of referring to altitude, because that's where the markhor is also, on the highest cliffs, near the clouds. So all these visual cues were sort of married and managed to put this thing out. Then when you see the sort of spiraling horns, which is the beauty of the markhor, you've seen that we brought in the elements of the green, but various shades of green. You have the forest green, which is in the valley, then you sort of go up to the relatively light greens, then you have the lime green, and right at the top, you sort of have a sunshine yellow. So the entire visual vocabulary was created. Again, it's not a single color, it's a palette. The palette is your mood, and it's so much better to go for a mood than a single color or a swatch that your brand can sort of appropriate for itself. So then when it came to the design, we knew that we couldn't make the markhor look like a goat because this was an international brand. A lot of people may not know what the markhor is. So you will notice a lot of visual cues with respect to the design. So you'll probably notice a unicorn in there. You'll notice Pegasus in there. I might have to be careful of what I say next, but you might even notice the Burak in there. So it's one part horse, it's one part goat, it's one part fantasy, it's one part lots of things to bring this beautiful symbol to life. So again, there's the reality. The reality of the design is one thing, but 90% of it is how you have ROI, return on idea. And that can only come once you have an investment of the imagination inside anything that we do. So we've invested a lot of imagination in this design. And then it flew for the longest time until somebody in the Supreme Court said, go back. So that's the story behind this one design.
I actually, I only knew of ROI as return on investment. So return on idea is something new for me. Thank you for, letting me know about that. And I always envisioned, this logo as just as a marker, and I never thought about the other attributes and the other, what you spoke about. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, you're meant to feel them. You're meant to feel them. You're not meant to know them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And design is engineering the feeling. Mm-hmm. We can give words to those feelings later as copywriters or as a great persuaders. You're not meant to know, but you're meant to feel. And I'm sure everybody felt this markhor to be more than a goat, because it has a larger than life, a more epic feel, which was necessary, and it was done by virtue of design.
Yeah.
Either you've frozen or I can't hear you. Yeah, I can see you.
There?
Yeah, we can hear you now. No, you're frozen again. Kind of. It's beginning.
Yeah. So, can you hear me now, though? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Okay. Really sorry about that. I have nothing to do with it. It's the internet. So yeah. So I'd love for you to speak about rebranding. You work with them. It's a very interesting.
We're losing your connection, Maryam. We lost you again. Abdullah, did you get any of that? No.
Interesting case study.
Maryam, I can't hear you. Can't hear you at all. You're frozen now. I can hear Abdullah. I can see Abdullah clearly, but you're frozen, and we can't hear you. So the markhor is back, but you're still frozen. I'm sure this will be edited out.
Can you hear me now? No, it's live.
Now,
We're live,
yes,
actually.
Now we can. Okay, good.
Oh, I'm glad. So I really would like you to talk about, Zong's logo. Yeah. That is something I'd really like for you to discuss because of the play of pink with green. And that is something very interesting for.
Is there some way for you to bring the logo on the screen? Is there something on Zong?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
absolutely.
Then I think as long as people can see the O of Zong, then there's a great story behind it.
Yeah. Of course. I'm trying to open that. If you can just give me a second.
Oh, okay. So every time we sort of move into a organization, obviously the first thing we do is make sure that everything is synergized. Everything needs to be synergized. Before we went into this brand, it was hemorrhaging. That's the word. It was hemorrhaging. That's it. That's cool. It was hemorrhaging so much that every single asset, and by asset I mean every piece of their communication touch points, was sort of all over the place. When we were redesigning Zong, then we needed what we call a sonic logo. Apart from the visual logo, we needed an audio logo as well for them. And if you think about Nokia, then you might remember their audio logo is Nokia, based on the 5 syllables. Even with Sony, It's a Sony has 3 sounds that are sort of indelibly, hardwired into our minds. So, of course, one of the things about the Zong logo was not just the visual identity, but also what kind of audio logo can a single syllabic brand name possibly possess? There are no syllables for us to have fun with. There's no sound that we can create until, of course, inspiration struck. And we're like, well, what does Zong sound like as a Chinese brand? And we're like, oh, it sounds like the Chinese gong. Zong sounds like a gong. So every time in all our communications, every time the logo appears, the sound of a gong is also accompanied with the logo, and it changes on sort of different platforms. There's a rock sounding gong. There's sort of a more traditional sounding gong. There's a Punjabi sounding gong, and there's a more Chinese sounding gong. But there's a gong sound with Zong. But if you look at the O in the Zong logo, you will notice that it's sort of broken at the bottom, which is where the interest actually is put out, and that's in negative space. It's actually a mallet striking a gong. It's a mallet striking a gong. So the sound of the logo is sort of visually embedded in it, so that it becomes a permanent visual cue that we can use forever and ever as we go, down the years. So that's sort of one part of how the brand will work. Another thing, which is more about marketing, is that because they had superior technology when this brand was being developed, they were the only ones with 4G. Then we turned the name. It wasn't about Zong. We started calling it as Zong 4G. So every time when we refer to the brand in communications, we call it Zong 4G. So the 4G element is intrinsically linked to the brand. That's a marketing aspect about the branding. And it says, I think, a China mobile company at the bottom. Yeah, that's just a descriptor. Although a new dream is their slogan, but there's a story behind that as well. That a new dream is actually referring to AND, which is the Chinese retail company for China Mobile. So their version of Zong in China is AND, and stands for a new dream. So if we ever need to import that brand into our sort of market landscape, then all we need to do is just borrow a new dream and bring it to life. So the point is that everything that we need, or everything that a startup needs to be embedded in it now, so that you can pull it out later. Because borrowing cues of any kind later is just more of a headache. So the more thinking you do now, the easier it will be for you to work your magic in the future. That's sort of the lesson that you can take from this kind of thinking.
Thank you, Faraz. That's immensely valuable. Is there any other particular logo that you would like to discuss, before we head to Abdullah and what he has to share about?
I'm sort of more. Now, if you just keep seeing all of this, everything has just sort of been synergized. No, I think the points. Every logo type, and I'm just sort of scanning 30 years of working in this environment. Even with Engro, which is right over there. It's a symbol. A symbol means nothing, right? It's the meaning behind it that needs to be invested. It's sort of modern, contemporary. It could be 3 hills. It could be a sense of transparency. It could be a sense of growth. It doesn't matter. The point is that what you want to say is what it will stand for. That's the lesson that you sort of have to take. Otherwise, if you're not going to give it a positioning, it can mean many things to many people. And that's okay. So if you're a startup, and for example, you're now going to be, your startup is electric bikes that anybody could hire around town, right? You don't have to show a, motorized bike as part of your logotype. You'd rather develop a symbol that is more about the attitude with which you work, maybe some aspect of your functionality, maybe about the benefit that you provide? Is there some symbolic way to show fun, convenience, health? I mean, pick an attribute that really works and bring that to life in the most compelling way possible. That's what logotype design really has to be about. And then once you've got that, and a logo is only 5% of your brand identity, right? Once you've got that locked, it's the remaining 95% that you need your partners, people like Abdullah and myself and you, Maryam, that can sort of, people like us, and can come in and then help you expand that canvas to the next level. But if, as a startup, if you're only working on a logotype, please don't be functional. You know, that's sort of the lesson I'd like to take out. Don't be functional with colors. Don't be functional with your visual vocabulary. Don't be functional in your thinking. Be as compelling, provocative, and as imaginative as possible, because that's going to help us push and open up the frontiers sort of for you. And whatever logotype you'll pick from my career, it's the same story. But of course, the client is different. The landscape is different. The persuasion is different. Some clients are risk averse, so you sort of have to take them very gently. Some companies take decades to move inches. That's a different strategy altogether. When you work with a Sate, a local Desi, Pakistani Sate, some of them are even bolder than anyone else because they can take faster decisions. They're not sort of encumbered by protocol or red tape or bureaucracy, you know? So every client is unique, but what's important is that you sort of take them to the next level. Maryam's frozen again, Abdullah, right? She's frozen again. We can't see you. Maybe if you restart, Maryam. How's the weather in Lahore, Abdullah?
I'm based in Islamabad. Islamabad is wonderful.
I am really sorry. It's the internet over here at my end.
We're talking about the weather. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, so Abdullah and Faraz, we have a question before we move on to Abdullah, and we ask you the same question. This is from Ibtihaj, and the question is, can having a logo that builds the interest of local people due to emotional attachment cast a negative impact in the international market? That's a very interesting question.
It's a good question. It's a hard question. Abdullah and I had decided before this presentation, Ibtihaj, that no hard questions will be asked of us. Okay, no, again, it's a great question, but I think it's based on you thinking that your logotype is going to be functional. The markhor is a local animal. It's our national animal. It's as local as it can get. It's indigenous to us. And yet, apart from the ISI, it really hasn't been used commercially anywhere. And yet here is an example of how that same thing was manufactured in such a way that it would appeal to a wider, more international audience. However, if your logotype is a samosa, okay, let's get desi. Hey, that's going to work wonders internationally because, again, it follows advertising protocol. The world is zigging, you're zagging. Your triangle is about as unique as it gets because there's nobody else out there. You know, in fact, think of it this way. The objective is to open a new box in the mind, right? You have to open up a new box in the mind. So every time I pick something, let's say I pick up this mug and I call it 501. This is a 501 mug. I'm just going to remind you of Levi's, because that's what these numbers are associated with. So you don't want to, what you want to do is open up a mind. So if your local logotype will open up and create a space in the minds of prospects internationally, hold on to it. It's an advantage. But it's the role of communication that can help you close the gap. It's the role of communication that can help you communicate and get people to understand what your identity or what your brand sort of stands for. It's not the job of a visual symbol to do that. Words belong to the writer. It's the writer's job to communicate what your visual vocabulary is about, what it stands for. Otherwise, if you're selling samosas, your logotype will be a samosa, and if you're selling a bicycle, your logotype will be a bicycle. You don't want to be in that trap. Okay, I hope that
I
I hope that answered it.
I actually agree, and I mean, I'd love for Abdullah to pitch in his thoughts in relation to the same question. And also, Abdullah, coming back to color psychology as well. I mean, you play with colors in your design, and you also happen to be an interior architect. And that revolves around creating an identity for, let's say a small startup company, an SME, an organization or corporation, or even somebody's, residence for that matter. So I'd love for you to, to share your thoughts on, how do you pick colors? How does it work? And how do colors resonate with the audience?
A couple of things that I consider whenever I have to choose a color is the fact that what is that company revolving around? What is their main idea? What is their main objective? And I think that that really helps us in understanding that, all right, maybe this is the direction in which the company wants to go. So that's how we select colors for them. One thing that I would like to add here, then, and another dimension you can say, is that climate plays an important role. So, for example, if in an interior space, you can't say that I just want to go ahead with red because I like the color red, because red is like a warm color. So maybe as far as our climate is concerned, as far as the geographical situation of Pakistan is concerned, maybe red is like not a should not be like your primary choice when it comes to interior. So I think that like cool colors are like more pertinent, or are more as far as our climate is concerned. So that is something that I recommend all my clients. And I think that this is something that one thing that I would like to continue, or, like connect the thread with what Faraz said earlier, that experiment. So I think that if, experimenting, or, like doing something a little different, so that people remember that, like they went to that place and they saw that particular wall, or, like their logo was, like of that particular color. I think that that kind of stays with you. So experiment is definitely one thing, thinking outside the box, and obviously keeping the climate in mind as far as the interior is concerned. These are the few key points that I always consider.
Thank you. That is great, because when you spoke of experiment, and when you spoke of, earlier you spoke about observation, commercial innovation again popped in my head for us. And so, I mean, I'd love for people to know what exactly commercial innovation is. Faraz and I, we were having a conversation where he calls commercial innovation industrial design, and it's a relatively newly coined term. And but the interesting thing about commercial innovation is that, like Levi's 360 jeans, re-engineered jeans. One great example would be the Heinz ketchup bottle that can, you can pop that in the side of the fridge. Sensory packaging, for that matter. The packaging is so good, it's so great that you really want to grab that product, and you actually want to buy that particular product. So, I mean, speaking in terms of visual storytelling, we as a company, we're big on visual storytelling. Even through our film lab, that's what we do. So, how can, I mean, Faraz and Abdullah, whoever would like to go first, speaking of visual communication, visual storytelling through commercial innovation, I mean, what are the steps that, as a startup can take, for effectively telling their visual story and then implementing that in the shape of a product or a service, for that matter? Yeah.
I've been speaking too much. I think Abdullah, if you could start on this.
I think this marketing is you are the master of this. So I think that maybe you should answer first, and then I can add like a couple of points that I think are important.
Sure. So in terms of industrial design, at that point, well, design is innovation. I mean, you're creating something new and ideally better. Either it's if it's an existing design, then there are two sort of extremes. Either it's an evolution, just small incremental changes, or it's a revolution. I mean, just overhaul the whole thing and do something brand new, and everything else sort of comes with that. Okay, then there's this entire world of communication. Now, you might refer to it as visual storytelling, Somebody else might refer to it as our copy platform. Somebody will say, hey, what's the big idea behind our brand? Somebody else will say, hey, have you got my TV script ready? What's my TV commercial, going to be all about? Somebody might say, have you got my style guide in place and what does it represent? It's all one and the same thing. And we go back to the same set of requirements. There are lots of fancy words. There's lots of jargon behind all of this, all right? A filmmaker only sees, speak to a director. The director doesn't give a rat's ass about your story, about your brand. He just wants beautiful postcard pictures. And then he's out. In the old days, the agency would take the footage, the rushes, as we call them, back to the agency, and the agency would edit the commercial. It doesn't happen anymore because I think, directors now are slightly more savvier when it comes to creating advertising films. But initially, that's what used to happen because there was just this massive discrepancy between the visual nature of the brand and then the more strategic, marketing driven, brand driven nature of what is actually required. I mean, the same pencil could be marketed in entirely different ways because that's where the difference is actually born, right? I mean, it's not in the product. The difference is born in the idea. In fact, there was somebody who said that marketing is not a battle of your product or your innovation. Marketing is a battle between respective copywriters. It's a battle of the better idea in the marketplace. That's really what we're all about. Now, how that idea takes shape and form is entirely the call of the times. Whether it's a marketing demand, whether it's a client's demand, whether it's a client's wife's demands, who knows what the demand is. But at the 101, what you need to do is once you've got, let's say, all your hygiene elements, right? Once the quality is in place, then you can concentrate on the originality, right? Quality is the price of entry to the market, so you've got to be good, but it's originality that is the price of entry to the human heart and mind, okay? So how do you work on the originality? The point that you raised is just one of many, which is storytelling. The human mind is hardwired for storytelling, okay? In fact, if you take 60 seconds, for any given period, out of the 60 seconds, probably 40 seconds of those we've already escaped. We're living in La La Land. Maybe 20 seconds we're actually wondering about our reality. So if you think about it, if you think of the human lifespan, then 95% of the time we're living in La La Land. We're living in the land of the imagination, which is why advertising is so incredibly potent, because it gives you a story that we can sort of take our migrations onto and just sort of escape. Whether it's reading a book or, we automatically veer towards somebody telling a story. And the better that story is, the more we'll be captivated and the quicker we'll move towards it. And the more articulate it is, the more it's just going to sort of captivate us and gravitate us towards it. So how do you tell the brand story? That's what we've come down to it, right? How do you tell the brand story? There are two ways. One way is the functional way, that we are in the business of creating wonderful car tires and they have great grip and traction and so on and so forth. Blah, 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 blah. Functional, boring, death by jargon. That's one way to do it. Another way to tell the same brand story about tires would be, hey, what if we discover the world's greatest chefs and award them a star? Maybe then people can use our tires to drive all the way to discover those chefs and those restaurants. That's a great brand story. And that's the Michelin tire brand story. The Michelin star is not unique. The Michelin star is about the Michelin tire. Because once those people figured out that those are restaurants in these far-flung places, we've got to go and try these restaurants out, then guess which tire that we're using? You see my point? So it's that we should be after. We're sort of repeating ourselves now, but it's that quality of innovation, that quality of imagination, that quality of discovery that your brand story really needs to be about. Any sort of beginning copywriter can write you a wonderful mission, vision, and value statement, and someone can articulate that for you. Go and do that. By all means, go and do that. That's important. But the more strategic thing to do is to see how you can bring that alive, how you can single-mindedly make that proposition come alive in a compelling way. That is your creative strategy. That's what your story should ideally be about. And once you've got that in place, whether it's through a signature line or an orchestrated and curated visual vocabulary, once you've got all of that in place, it becomes so much easier to live and abide by the rules and the traditions and the mythology that you've sort of set for yourself.
No, Faraz, there are multiple points that you mentioned over here, and I agree. And, you know, as you mentioned, orchestrate earlier, you spoke of quality of innovation. And I think one of the best examples, my personal favorite, is the tight pen. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it. You can carry it in your pocket. It can be in your bag. It's not available in Pakistan, but if anybody happens to travel abroad, and it fights a very common, issue when we have stains on our shirt, and when we wash it, if we are in a meeting or somewhere, the shirt is crumpled and rumpled, and it's not very nice. So I love how there is a quality of innovation, even in very in very tough sectors, as common as, creating a detergent and being innovative as a detergent company. So absolutely, quality of innovation really matters. And one thing that I'd like to add
one more thing just to that point, because you picked on product innovation. So yes, the reason why Volvo's one-word equity, or the reason why Volvo's platform is safety, is because they sort of were able to invent the modern seatbelt as we now know it. A strap around your waist and the strap across your shoulders. So that's the reason why Volvo stands for safety, not because the vehicle is made out of sort of high-grade armor. It's because of that simple innovation of creating a belt that saves lives. And they have stood by that one word. Forget the one phrase that Abdullah and I were talking about. They have stood by that one word, safety, for decades. You see my point? Now, Tide, of course, is a cleaner. And they've done a pen today. They might do a pencil tomorrow. They might do a eraser of some kind later. Those innovations will continue to happen. But as branding people, my job is not their product innovation. That's their R&D. They need to develop that. My job is just to make sure that whatever they innovate needs to be brought to life in the most compelling way, possible. And one of the examples in communication that came out, I think, was a TV ad, and may not be for Tide. I could be wrong. Maybe it was for Ariel. But it was how the stain was doing all the talking. So the scenario was a interviewer sort of interviewing a applicant, and they was sitting across a desk, and the applicant had a stain on his shirt. So while the interviewer was taking the interview, it was the stain that was doing most of the talking, because obviously when there's a stain, the eye goes towards the mark. Absolutely. I mean, it was incredibly well executed and so simple. So maybe the right storytelling is not a long narrative. The right storytelling is about being awesomely simple. And if your story could be communicated in a sentence, in a line, in less than 20 words, you're laughing, literally. I mean, the modern attention span is down to 6 seconds. In our day, it was the 30-second TVC, for Gen X. But for Gen Z, it's like less than 6 seconds now. So what you need to do is just make sure that whether they give you 2 seconds or 1 second or half a nanosecond, your brand just needs to give out the same set of cues, visually, text-wise, orally, in every single way,
I think the problem happens because we all expect our story to be larger than life. And I don't think that's how it works. I think that, it can be very simple, as Faraz said. And if I want to connect it with the second point that I want to make, is that there was this German architect, and he said about his buildings that God is in the details. So even if it's just like a simple strategy, maybe like a simple packaging, maybe a simple way that you put your posts on Instagram, it can be anything, but just do it like nicely. And just really focus on that, and just don't wait that they're going to be larger than life kind of a narrative or larger than life kind of a story with amazing characters. Probably that's never going to happen. You got to start from somewhere, and that larger than life kind of life story would slowly build up. You will eventually get there, but you got to start from somewhere. So I think that's
not all of us can write War and Peace. You need to be a Tolstoy to be able to do that. But
Yes.
maybe some of us can just get away with doing whatever it is that we do and just do it really beautifully.
Yeah.
That alone is a huge service to mankind, because we live in ugly environments, thoughtlessness, radicalized thinking, polarized humanities. That's what needs to get bridged by creative people, by the creative community, and especially anybody who's putting out a brand. It's your product second. What comes first is how you bring and connect people together. That's really your primary goal. And if Abdullah does it through buildings, by bringing people together, maybe our job is to do it through ideas of bringing people together. It's all about that. It's about building that tribe. Notice how we're talking about the same tenets all over again, and maybe these same tenets have been given to us by the same set of prophets through the same set of books across 6,000 religions. It's the same thing. Finding common ground. But how you bring your voice to that common ground is really what sets us apart.
Absolutely. I would, I'm agreeing to everything, but I would definitely, I've been bobbing my head, by the way. So to everything that Abdullah and you have been mentioning, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. No, it's very true. It's very true because you're right. So, I mean, we're coming back to the same point, but yes, the creative process has so many steps. There's so many funnels. There's so many ways to go about and do it. As we started off, you spoke of visual vocabulary. Abdullah mentioned how he incorporates all of that through his work, through his design, be it interior, be it buildings, the play of colors, the color psychology. Since we're ending the session, I would love for Abdullah to share any last thoughts or any suggestions for startups who are working on, right now building a narrative around their brand. Any suggestion that you might have for them, followed by Faraz.
I just want to say, just don't be scared. Whatever you have, just put it out there. And I'm sure that there will be individuals who would connect to your story, who would connect with the narrative that you have, and they would, support you. And then the second thing that I wanted to say is that just focus that what is that one different thing that you are doing with that brand or with whatever you want to make a difference with. So I think that that is something very important. If you are doing the exact same thing what everyone else is doing, so probably you're not going to succeed. So you have to bring something new to the table. So just be aware of that and make logical decisions and trust the process. Trust the process. So that's where I'm going to end it. That trust the process, and all of these 2-3 things that I've mentioned is going to take you places.
Absolutely. Trust the process. And to that, I'll add elevation also requires separation, Abdullah. So I'm sure you'll agree to that, right? So,
Yes.
yeah. So Faraz, I'd love to, have your thoughts on this. Yes.
Sure. Trust the process. I just want to add to what Abdullah sort of said. So it's one vertical. Trust the process, no doubt. Bring something new to the table, no doubt. If you're not bringing something new to the table, then treat it in a new way, communicate it in a new way, stand out, apart in some way. That's sort of the second thing that you can do, because most products are generic and, everything is vanilla. Most people are doing the same thing all over again. And that's why the person in the front tends to have the largest market share, because they just have first mover advantage, as we sort of say in marketing. I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of being single-minded. As we work day in and day out, we sort of get distracted by so many responsibilities, including the stuff that needs to go into your brand. So I think the real art is to understand that your instinct is God speaking to you, and to be able to dovetail that instinct always meticulously into the broader vision, and that vision has to be as single-minded as possible. If you can master the art of being single-minded, you can master the art of most anything, because that level of focus is really akin to worship. When we work, it's almost like being in your own sort of temple, because where else are you that focused and that sort of disciplined? Other than your given place of worship. So that's sort of what I would probably ask everyone to sort of concentrate on. That take all those assets that you have, bring them together, find a signature thought that can underline everything that you're doing, shape it, mold it, and communicate it inventively in as single-minded a way as possible, and then enjoy the money.
Yes, but it's part of the deal. It comes eventually if you have great ideas in place.
I had to add that fine print. After 20 years, enjoy the money. Yeah.
Experiencing it first.
People don't talk about that, right? It takes 20 years to become an overnight success. People don't talk about that. It's true.
Yes, that's very true. That's very, very true. But I absolutely love the part where you spoke about master the art of being single-minded, disciplined, focused. It is so important, it's so essential to make the creative process happen and then to go forward in that similar direction. But on that note, Abdullah and Faraz, thank you so very much for joining us today. And thank you for this very enlightening session. I actually got to learn so much from both of you. And I'm sure all the startups...
I learned so much from you guys.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On that note, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.